Ty, a lot to talk about here. Obviously, what Rebecca's talking about, there was a significant win for Trump and his efforts to expand executive power. He did, though, suffer today a number of losses at the Supreme Court, including his attempt to overturn the ruling against him in the E. Jean Carroll case, where a federal jury in New York had found the president liable for sexually abusing and defaming Carroll. And Trump responded today on social media saying, "I will continue the fight against this weaponization and lawfare case against me, including the ridiculous claim of defamation, with all my power and strength. This case is really against the United States of America and all it stands for, and should never be allowed to happen to another president." Can he do anything more about this?
Nothing. He's going to write a $5.8 million check. Have to supplement the 5.5 that's already being held by the court, and E. Jean Carroll will cash that check sometime in sometime in the near future. With regard to the her claims, keep in mind that this is one of 27 women over the course of the last 3 decades who's come forward with accusations against the president for sexual misconduct. This is one of 3 women that he has lied openly about. Just since his presidency, and Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, who were at the heart of his 34 criminal felony convictions. He denied having relationships with them. He denied having anything to do with her, said she wasn't his type, said other things about her that were defamatory. The jury didn't have any difficulty with that. And he lost $5 million in the first trial. Under Joe Tacopina, who I think did an excellent job, compared to Alina Habba, who ended up losing $83 million.
So what about the mail-in ballot case? I mean, that was significant, and you heard Kristen Holmes reporting, right, that he is really upset about that. Then there's the Lisa Cook case, which he also took a hit in from the Fed. She obviously was Fed governor. So do you read anything into these losses by Trump at the Supreme Court, where obviously, let's just state the obvious here, Ty, this is a Supreme Court where he thinks he stacked it with people who were going to rule in his favor, and FTC ruling aside, which was obviously very significant, they did rule in his favor. These other very, very monumental cases, they did not.
Right. Trump views this very transactionally. They're his people. They should vote his way. I mean, that's his view of the world. But, these people are, they're there to call balls and strike, as Chief Justice Roberts said at his hearing. He did that today. I think he tried very desperately, if you look at the alignment of all these different opinions, to hold the center of the court. He was in the majority in the Cook case. He was in the majority in the Mississippi ballot case. Amy Coney Barrett, who wrote the Mississippi ballot case, is a conservative. She is a strong conservative, but she's also an intellectually honest person, and she wrote the decision in the way that she actually believes. I know they're livid about that. I know Steve Bannon, one of Trump's advisors, convicted felon and Epstein confidant, has trashed her today, and that Trump is livid. But the reality is she did her job, and she should be proud of that. So I think these are very, very significant decisions. I think the Cook case is very much different than Ms. Slaughter's case. I commend Ms. Slaughter for her service to the country, but I think on constitutional grounds that the cases are very distinct, and the enabling legislation for the Fed has that for-cause provision that Justice Roberts relied upon.
So we're hours away, possibly, from birthright citizenship. What do you expect there?
I expect that, given the rulings today, particularly the ruling on the Mississippi voting case, I would expect that Trump will be rebuked again on birthright citizenship by the court. It could be unanimous. It should be unanimous. It's really an obvious decision, but given the tone of some of the conservative opinions, particularly Justice Alito, he and Thomas may rule against him. I do think that the government will likely win the 2 transgender sports cases, where different states have tried to eliminate trans athletes from women's sports. So I think there'll be a little bit of some for Trump, some for the people tomorrow. But on birthright citizenship, which I think is at the fundamental core of what it is to be an American, I think that the country will be proud tomorrow of the Supreme Court.
My first guest is one of the Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook's attorneys, Norm Eisen, joins me now. Norm, I'm so glad that you're here. I know that you have been very busy, meticulously trying to protect your client, but also the legacy that this represents as well. And I know the Fed governor is grateful the Supreme Court has saved her job for now, but they also expanded the president's executive power. Norm, how does that sit with her tonight?
Well, the Supreme Court protected the independence of the Fed, Laura. Mm-hmm. So let's start with the centrality of the Federal Reserve to the U.S. economy and to the economy of the world. That is a significant matter. We're very grateful that the rule of law has operated. Yeah. And before turning to the Slaughter case, let's note this whole absurd mess was based on groundless allegations against Dr. Cook. It was stopped and enjoined by a lower court. We won at the D.C. Circuit on appeal, and today we won at the Supreme Court. So that is a significant victory.
But there are some limitations. When you get to that, but limitations, of course, one of the things Chief Justice Roberts pointed out is that the ultimate question of whether the president can remove her for cause will depend in part on the underlying facts. In this opinion, we have not addressed those facts. So explain why this is far from over.
Yes, but if you look at that page of the decision, it is the most important page, yes. 13 and 14 of the decision. They say you have to look at the unique status and role of the Fed.
Yes.
They say our review is deferential, but we are not required to exhibit a naivete from which ordinary citizens are free. In other words, they know what's gone on here. They reject what happened to Dr. Cook as baseless, as a violation of her rights. And I think while they don't define what cause is, they're clear that it is an exacting standard because there's no factual basis for these absurd allegations being made against Dr. Cook.
But explain.
I am confident that we will be able to continue to fight this issue. Now,
but I want you to explain. I know we're going at this because I want, aside from the underlying facts involving in her particular case, because you know this case is bigger, of course, than Dr. Cook. And obviously, it's personal to her, but it's very personal to those who believe in the Constitution and, of course, the independent agencies. Explain why the court would say the Federal Reserve has a different place in our society in terms of the independence of the agency compared to, say, the Slaughter case, where they said the for cause does not apply there.
The court looked to the historical status. The majority are originalists. Mm-hmm. They look to the historical status of the First Bank of the United States, the Second Bank, and the other financial institutions, and the independence that they had historically. I do not agree with the distinction that they made. I think the independent agencies, which have been recognized for almost a century since Humphrey's executor, as an essential part of American governance, they should have been accorded the same treatment of for-cause removal. Congress has interpreted the role of the independent agencies, and they have said, we are going to give this Article I power, congressional power. We're going to authorize that for these independent agencies that operate within Article II. I disagree with Slaughter, but protecting the independence of the Fed, the American economy, the world economy is very material. And if you look at Slaughter, they do say they are not reaching a wide variety of issues. Not all offices created by Congress necessarily come with the triggering executive power, so there may be exceptions for other offices created by Congress. There are some functions traditionally handled outside the executive. This rule may not apply there, and on and on. So don't give up hope. We have over 300 cases and matters at Democracy Defenders Fund in action. We're going to keep on fighting.
Well, acting DNI Bill Pulte believes you might have to keep cutting when it comes to your client because he believes that she will be indicted for mortgage fraud. You are adamant about the bogus nature of the underlying claims that triggered this lawsuit and ultimately ended in front of the Supreme Court. But do you see this indictment coming down the road, or is Pulte just trying to litigate the case in the court of public opinion?
There's no basis for an indictment. We've seen this administration wrongfully investigate and attempt to indict people. The courts have been very tough on that. Look at Attorney General Tish James. The court threw the case out, and then you were a prosecutor, Laura. Grand juries refused to consider the case. That's so rare. Jim Comey, many others, the Broadview Six in Chicago, the Sandwich thrower. So many of these cases have been rejected by the courts. If they try this misbegotten approach to Dr. Cook, we're going to vigorously fight it. I don't think the courts will entertain it. How wrong when the government says this kind of thing about people. When you lose a case at the Supreme Court, you immediately move to target someone. That's not America.
Norm Eisen, thank you.
Thanks, Laura.